I had a beautiful daughter. She had just turned 18. Her closet was filled with all kinds of beautiful dresses, but because of a little monster, she would never have the chance to wear them again. The little monster stood there, flipping me the middle finger with a smug grin. Your daughter's life was cheap anyway. She got what she deserved. We're minors. Our age is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Marcus went mad. He grabbed a kitchen knife, wanting to trade his life for that bastard's. But I held him back with all my strength. One death is too easy for him. Both he and his mother must go to hell. I had an 18-year-old daughter named Chloe. Her name meant blooming and full of life. She loved wearing dresses. Her closet was packed with them, all bought by Marcus and me. Marcus was the ultimate girl dad, spoiling her every chance he got. But all of that was gone now. Chloe lay in the dirt, her torn white dress covered in mud and blood. She was frozen in time, forever 18. We realized Chloe was missing an hour after school ended. Marcus had came home holding a giant princess plushie, excited to surprise her. He waited and waited, but when she didn't show up, he got anxious and told me to look for her. I hadn't wanted Chloe to go out in the first place. The weather was terrible, and the sky was pitch black. Mom, I promise I'll be back in half an hour. I'll definitely beat Dad home. I already made plans with Bella. You don't want your daughter to be a liar, do you? She had looked up at me with her innocent face, shaking my arm and begging. No lies. The weather is bad today. Just play for a bit and come straight back. I couldn't say no to her. Chloe was smart. Whenever she pouted, Marcus and I would melt instantly. But an hour passed and Chloe still wasn't home. I decided to check their secret hideout. I knew the place well. It was a wooded area right next to the community park. Chloe and Bella had decorated it like a fairy tale forest, pretending they were princesses living there. But when I arrived, no one was there. The decorations they had carefully set up were trashed, looking like they had been maliciously vandalized. Chloe, Chloe, I screamed her name, but there was only silence. Panic set in. I ran around the subdivision, shouting Chloe's name over and over. By the time dusk fell, I went to Bella's house. I knocked on the door for a long time before it finally opened. Bella came home early. She was exhausted and already fell asleep, Sarah, Bella's mom said. She only opened the door a crack, blocking my view. Before I could ask more, she hurriedly shut the door in my face. I completely lost it. Chloe never wandered off on her own, and she would never disappear for this long. I called 911, but the dispatcher told me they couldn't do anything since she hadn't been missing for 24 hours. Marcus arrived shortly after, and we rushed to the security office to check the cameras. The security guard, who usually bragged about safety first, acted like we were making a big deal out of nothing. He reluctantly logged into the system and slowly scrolled through the footage. Sir, please can you speed it up? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Beside me, Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw tight. What's the rush? A girl that age doesn't just vanish. She probably went to a party or something. The guard's careless attitude snapped my last nerve. Just as I was about to scream at him, Marcus grabbed my arm. Sir, you're a parent too. I'm sure you understand how we feel, Marcus said, forcing a polite smile as he pulled $200 bills from his wallet and slipped them into the guard's pocket. All right. Yeah, parent to parent, I get it. Let's see. Is this the right time? The guard's eyes flickered. He smoothly pocketed the cash and quickly set the timestamp to 6 p.m. On the screen, Chloe was skipping along, holding Bella's hand as they entered the woods. 20 minutes later, Bella ran out of the woods alone, looking terrified. The guard pulled up the cameras from all 4 surrounding angles, but Chloe was nowhere to be seen. A wave of dizziness hit me. I turned to Marcus. I went to Bella's house. Her mom said she was asleep and wouldn't let me in. Marcus's voice shook. Bella knows something. We have to make her talk. I told you, she doesn't know anything. Stop coming here. My kid has school tomorrow. Sarah wouldn't look me in the eye, still refusing to open the door. Can we just talk to Bella for a second? I promise we won't scare her. Just a few questions, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Just leave. She's asleep. We don't know anything. She bit her lip, and right before slamming the door she muttered, It's about to pour. You should ask someone who actually knows those woods. Someone who knows those woods? Mrs. Higgins. Marcus said with absolute certainty. If anyone knew every corner of this neighborhood, it wasn't the security guards or the HOA. It was Mrs. Higgins, the community's head housekeeper. She knew every piece of gossip and every resident's business. She knew the park area like the back of her hand. By the time we found Mrs. Higgins, Chloe had been missing for 3 hours. Near the park woods, Mrs. Higgins looked surprised. There are only trees there. The cameras should have caught her leaving. Could a living, breathing person just vanish? My legs gave out, and I could barely breathe. Wait. Mrs. Higgins suddenly gasped. Are you sure you searched everywhere? Even the places off camera? When we nodded, she hesitated, her voice trembling. There is one place, follow me. Mrs. Higgins led us back into the dark woods. I stared at a massive, ancient oak tree with a hollow trunk. My mind went blank. Marcus, panting heavily, brushed aside the thick branches blocking the hollow. He froze. His eyes went wide. And then, no, no. He let out a guttural, agonizing scream, like a dying beast. He clawed at his hair, stumbling backward until he collapsed into the mud. Marcus, it's not Chloe, right? Tell me it's not her. I forced a laugh, trying to stay sane. But Marcus didn't answer. He tried to stand up several times but kept falling. Finally, he crawled on his hands and knees toward the tree, sobbing hysterically. Chloe, baby. Chloe. It was my daughter. I stumbled forward and fell to my knees, paralyzed by the horror in front of me. My daughter, my sweet Chloe, was curled up in the hollow of the tree. Her torn white dress was covered in dirt. Her face, usually so full of smiles, was pale and stiff. Her fingernails were caked with dirt, showing how desperately she had clawed at the ground in fear. Her pink cartoon underwear was dragged down to her ankles. Baby. Chloe. Mom is here. Let me hold you. But the police officers who had just arrived dragged me back. They said they had to preserve the crime scene. They forced Marcus and me into separate rooms at the station to calm us down. But even though the scene was secured, it started to pour that night. The rain washed away almost everything. I couldn't understand. Who would do this to my baby? Marcus and I were peaceful people. We never fought with our neighbors. I even bought food for the neighborhood stray cats. Chloe was a good girl. She only had a few close friends and never got into trouble. Her friend, Bella. I went back to Bella's house, this time accompanied by the detectives. When Sarah opened the door, a flash of pity crossed her eyes, but she quickly hid it. She offered her condolences but insisted Bella came home early and knew nothing. She claimed we were traumatized and accusing an innocent child. Bella herself screamed and hid in her bedroom when she saw me. The police had a duty to investigate, but they couldn't force a child to speak without evidence. After a long standoff, I stared at Sarah. Sarah, you're a mother too. I know you can understand what I'm going through. I paused, tears dripping from my chin. My daughter was only 18. Her birthday was in a few days. I raised her with everything I had and now. I knew I looked pathetic, my eyes swollen shut, but I forced myself to lock eyes with her. I'm begging you, help me. What happened? Why did Bella run out of the woods so terrified? Please help a grieving mother. Sarah looked away, her eyes darting around. She repeated the same cold line. I'm sorry, Claire. We really don't know anything. As soon as the words left her mouth, Marcus snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's shoulders and shaking her violently. You know. You damn well know. Tell me who did it. Who? You have a daughter too. If this was Bella, would you stay quiet? He was completely hysterical. It took 2 officers to finally restrain him. He thrashed until he passed out from pure exhaustion. The police advised us not to push too hard, warning us that it might backfire. They told us to wait until the rain stopped so they could look for other clues. But once the rain stopped, would there be any clues left? Just when Marcus and I were falling into utter despair, Sarah came to our house voluntarily. Bella stood behind her, crying and bowing to me. I'm sorry, Claire. My eyes were too swollen to open properly, but I strained to look at her. Bella, sweetie, can you tell me what happened that day? Bella burst into loud, sobbing tears. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was Tyler. He said if I told anyone, he'd beat me to death. I was so scared. I didn't want him to hurt me too. Sarah immediately hugged Bella, dropping to her knees in front of me. It's not Bella's fault. It's mine. I was so scared of what Tyler would do to my family. But Bella kept asking me when we were going to save Chloe. After Sarah finished explaining, I took a long, shaky breath. Sarah, are you willing to let Bella testify? We were playing in the woods, Bella sobbed, and Tyler came over. He wanted to play house. He said he was the dad, and we had to be his wives. He said Chloe's dress was pretty, so he wanted to play with her first. Chloe said it hurt and tried to run, but he beat her. He threw his jacket over her face to stop her from screaming. Then, Chloe stopped moving. It felt like shattered glass piercing my chest. Every breath tore at my lungs. I listened to Bella's trembling voice, shaking my head in disbelief. My daughter was only 18. She knew nothing of the cruelty of this world, and she was tortured to death. The police arrested Tyler quickly. He was 16, but he weighed 180 pounds and stood 6 feet tall. From behind, he looked like a fully grown man. When he saw us at the station, he shrank back. But a heavy, expensive-looking woman stepped in front of him, looking at us with utter disdain. Fine, I heard what happened. We'll pay for the funeral. How about that? She pulled 2 thick stacks of $100 bills from her designer purse and threw them onto the table. To my horror, Marcus laughed. He walked over, picked up the cash, and stepped closer to her. 20,000? That's it. He shook his head. How about I give you 100,000, and I get to take your son's life? Before anyone could react, Marcus slammed the cash into her face, lunged at Tyler, and started hammering his fists into the boy's face. Marcus was too fast. Within seconds, the officers tackled him to the ground, but Tyler's nose was already smashed and bleeding. Ah, you psychopath. Your daughter is already dead, and now you disfigured my son. He was supposed to go to a top private school. I was shaking with rage. What did she mean, your daughter is already dead? Seeing Marcus pinned down, Brenda became even more arrogant. My son told me everything. Your daughter loved wearing those revealing dresses. Wasn't she just begging for attention? Honestly, she deserved it. She's lucky it was my son. Otherwise, some homeless crackhead would have gotten to her. I was speechless with shock. The air inside the precinct's interview room was thick with the copper tang of Tyler's bloody nose and the heavy smell of stale coffee. Four officers held Marcus down against the linoleum floor. His chest heaved, his face pressed sideways against the dirt, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Tyler like a dying wolf staring down its killer. Tyler cowered behind his mother, holding a wad of paper towels to his face, his small, cruel eyes darting between Marcus and me. But behind the blood and the fake tears I saw it. A tiny, mocking smirk. He knew. He knew the law in this state viewed a 16-year-old as a child, no matter how large his frame, no matter how monstrous his mind. A man in a sharp gray three-piece suit pushed open the heavy door. He didn't look at Marcus on the floor, nor at me standing paralyzed in the corner. Walked straight to Brenda, handing her a silver pen and a stack of legal documents. Mrs. Vance, the attorney said smoothly, his voice dropping into that practiced, patronizing register reserved for high-price fixers. The bail application is already before the duty magistrate. Given Mr. Vance's status as a minor with no prior criminal record on file, and considering the lack of direct physical DNA remaining after last night's rainfall, he will be remanded to your custody under private home detention pending the preliminary assessment. Home detention? I spoke for the first time in hours. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like dry leaves scraping over stone. He murdered my daughter. He suffocated her under his jacket. He left her in a hollow tree like trash. The lawyer turned his head, giving me a brief, rehearsed look of professional sympathy. Ma'am, we sympathize deeply with your loss, but allegations must be proven in court. Right now, we are dealing with uncorroborated statements from an 8-year-old child and an unfortunate accident during juvenile play. Accident? Marcus roared from the floor, spitting blood onto the tile. He raped her. He killed her. Watch your language, sir, the lawyer warned, adjusting his cuffs. Or my client will file civil charges for defamation and assault. You just struck a minor inside a police station. Brenda straightened her designer jacket, wiping a speck of her son's blood from her fingernail. She looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated victory. Come along, Tyler, Brenda said softly, wrapping a crocodile skin arm around her monster's broad shoulders. Let's go home. The air in this place is filthy. Tyler turned as he reached the threshold. As his mother pulled him into the hallway, he looked back at me over his shoulder. He lifted his hand, the hand that had held a heavy denim coat over my daughter's face until her lungs stopped fighting, and flipped me the middle finger. We're minors. Our age is a get-out-of-jail-free card. The words echoed in my skull, sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. When the officers finally released Marcus, he scrambled to his feet, lunging toward the door. I'll kill him. I'll wait outside their gates. I'll tear his throat out. I grabbed Marcus's arm. My grip was so tight my fingernails tore through his cotton shirt, drawing blood from his skin. Marcus, stop. He turned on me, his face contorted in wild, hysterical betrayal. Claire, did you see him? Did you hear what that bitch said about Chloe's dresses? They're taking him home. He gets to sleep in a warm bed tonight while our baby is lying on a stainless steel slab in the morgue. I know, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. And if you go out there with a knife, you will stab him once, the police will shoot you dead, and Brenda Vance will use her billions to buy her son a fresh start in another state. Marcus shook, tears pouring down his bruised cheeks. Then what do we do, Claire? What do we do? I reached out, wiping the blood from his lip with the sleeve of my coat. We don't give them a quick death, Marcus, I whispered, staring into the dark hallway where Tyler and Brenda had vanished. One life for one life is too cheap. I am going to take everything she owns. Her money, her name, her freedom, and her precious little monster. I am going to burn their world to ash. The morning after Chloe's body was released to the funeral home, the local news ran a 3-minute segment. They called it a tragic community misunderstanding. Brenda's PR firm had moved with terrifying speed. By noon, 3 local online news outlets had published articles subtly altering the narrative. They didn't mention Tyler's name because he was a minor, referring to him only as a local youth assisting police with inquiries. Instead, they focused on Chloe. 18-year-old Chloe Miller, known in her subdivision for wearing revealing attire, was found deceased following a high-risk game in the woods. Sources close to the family suggest the victim may have suffered from previous emotional instability. I sat at Chloe's desk in her bedroom. The room still smelled of her strawberry body mist. Her closet door was half open, showing rows of bright, pastel skirts, yellow sundresses and white linen gowns, the clothes of an innocent girl who loved spring. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, holding her giant princess plushie, staring blankly at the floor. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. My phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Claire. Sarah's trembling voice came through the speaker. Claire, please. Don't call my house again. Sarah, I said calmly. The preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. Bella's testimony is the only thing that proves premeditation. I can't. Sarah broke down into hysterical sobs. Brenda's lawyers came to my workplace today, Claire. They showed my husband private financial records from his firm. They said if Bella takes the stand, my husband will be sued for corporate negligence. They'll ruin us. We'll lose our home. She's threatening you, I said. She has $50 million, Claire. Sarah screamed into the phone. You and Marcus are high school teachers. You can't fight her. Bella is just a child. She wakes up every night screaming that Tyler is under her bed. I have to protect my daughter. The line went dead. I set the phone on the desk, right next to Chloe's high school yearbook. Marcus looked up, his eyes hollow. They bought her off. No, I replied, standing up and pulling open Chloe's wardrobe. I reached inside, pulled out a simple dark gray tailored suit I used for parent-teacher conferences, and laid it on the bed. They intimidated her. Because Brenda Vance thinks money is an impenetrable shield. I walked over to Marcus, taking the plushie from his hands, and setting it gently on Chloe's pillow. Marcus, sell your grandfather's cabin in Maine, I said. He blinked, confused. What? Sell the cabin. Cash out my retirement fund. Take out a second mortgage on this house. Marcus stood up, his voice trembling. Claire, that's everything we have. That's our entire life savings. I looked him dead in the eye. Our life died in a hollow tree 7 days ago, Marcus, I said. We don't need a retirement. We need a war chest. 2 days later, I sat in a dimly lit corner of a downtown diner across from a man named David Miller. David was a disgraced former private investigator who had lost his license 5 years ago after digging too deep into a land development scandal involving the Vance Construction Group, Brenda's primary source of wealth. He dropped a yellowed, coffee-stained folder onto the formica table between us. Brenda Vance doesn't build houses, Mrs. Miller, David said, lighting a cheap cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on the wall. She builds debt traps. She buys up cheap land near wetlands, bribes local inspectors to sign off on environmental clearances, builds luxury subdivisions with substandard foundations, and sells them to middle-class families for 4 times the cost. I don't care about her houses, I said, sliding an envelope containing $10,000 in cash across the table. I care about her son. David tapped his ash into an empty coffee cup. Tyler Vance didn't just become a psychopath on Tuesday afternoon, Mrs. Miller. Kids like that have a trail. He opened the folder. 4 years ago, St. Andrew's Academy, a private prep school in the North District. A 12-year-old girl was admitted to the hospital with broken ribs and severe lacerations. She claimed a 14-year-old boy dragged her into the sports shed during recess. My heart stopped. Tyler. The school records say she fell off the bleachers, David sneered. 2 weeks later, St. Andrews received a $2 million anonymous donation for a new Olympic-sized swimming pool. The girl's family moved to Ohio 3 months later with a fresh, paid-off mortgage. He turned another page. 2 years ago, a summer camp in Vermont. A horse was found starved and beaten to death in the stables. A counselor pointed fingers at Tyler. 3 days later, the counselor was arrested for narcotics possession after 5 grams of cocaine miraculously appeared in his glove box. Charges were dropped when he signed an NDA and quit his job. I stared at the black and white photos in the folder. Photographs of a young Tyler, already broad-shouldered, standing beside his mother at school. Fundraising galas, his smile identical to the smirk he had offered me in the precinct hallway. She's been cleaning up his bloodstains since he was 12, I whispered. She doesn't just clean them up, David corrected, leaning forward, his eyes dark. She enables them. She believes her family is a superior species. In her mind, lower-class people exist to serve them, and middle-class people exist to be used by them. Where is the girl from Ohio? I asked. David pulled out a small slip of paper with a phone number written in blue ink. Her name is Maya, David said quietly. She's 16 now. She hasn't spoken a Word to a stranger in 4 years. But if you want to turn Tyler Vance's transfer, hearing from juvenile court to an adult criminal court, you're going to need more than an 8-year-old neighbor girl who's too scared to talk. I picked up the slip of paper and held it against my palm. I'll get her to talk, I said. The drive to Columbus, Ohio took 11 hours. Marcus drove in absolute silence, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, while I sat in the passenger seat reading through Tyler's academic and medical history. We pulled up to a small, worn-down ranch house in a working-class suburb outside the city. The lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling around the window frames. When I knocked on the door, a tired-looking woman in a nurse's uniform opened. Her eyes instantly narrowed when she saw my suit and my face. "If you're from the Vance family's insurance company," she said, her voice rising in immediate panic. "We signed the papers. We haven't said a word. Please, just leave us alone." "Mrs. Lynn," I said gently, holding up my hands. "I'm not from the Vance family." I pulled a small, framed photograph from my purse and held it out to her. It was Chloe, wearing her white dress, holding her 18-year-old birthday cake, laughing under the sun. Mrs. Lynn stared at the photo. Her eyes welled with tears. "Her name was Chloe," I whispered. "Tyler Vance murdered her 10 days ago." Mrs. Lynn covered her mouth, taking a shuddering step back into the hallway. "Oh, God, oh dear God." She led us inside. The house was dark, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Sitting in the corner of the small living room, wrapped in a heavy gray blanket despite the heat, was a girl with hollow eyes and pale, scarred wrists. Maya. She didn't look up when we walked in. She was staring at her own reflection in a cold cup of tea. I walked over, sinking quietly onto my knees beside her chair, just as I had done beside Chloe's bed 100 times before. "Maya," I said softly. The girl flinched, shrinking back against the cushions. "I know you don't want to remember," I said, my voice thick with a mother's grief. "I know you spent 4 years trying to bury his face, but he's still out there. He's sitting in his mother's mansion right now, playing video games, drinking fresh juice, waiting for his lawyers to tell him he's free." Maya's hands began to tremble violently under the blanket. "He told my daughter she was cheap," I continued, tears finally slipping down my cheeks. "He told her that her life didn't matter because he was a minor. He tore her dress, Maya. He put a coat over her face until her heart stopped." Maya turned her head slowly. Her dark, hollow eyes met mine. He used his belt," Maya whispered, her voice barely a breath, raspy from years of disuse. "He told me, if I screamed, his mother would make sure my dad lost his job at the factory." Her mother dropped to her knees beside us, sobbing quietly, holding Maya's trembling shoulders. "He did," Mrs. Lynn sobbed. "My husband lost his job 2 weeks after we reported it to the principal anyway. They drove us out of the state. We had nothing left, Claire. We had to take their money just to pay Maya's psychiatric bills." I reached out, gently touching Maya's hand. Her skin was ice cold, just like Chloe's had been under the oak tree. "Maya," I said, looking into her broken soul. "I am going to take everything Brenda Vance owns. I am going to tear down her company, strip her money and put her son in an adult prison for the rest of his natural life. But I need your voice." Maya stared at me for a long, agonizing minute. The silence in the room was so deep I could hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall. Then slowly, Maya pulled back her gray blanket. She unbuttoned the sleeve of her shirt, revealing a long, jagged, white scar running from her wrist to her elbow, a permanent mark left by Tyler's pocket knife 4 years ago. "I still have the shirt I wore that day," Maya whispered, her eyes suddenly burning with a cold, terrifying ember of dormant rage. "My mom hid it in the attic. It has his blood on it from when I bit his arm. I'll go with you to the courtroom." While Marcus stayed in Ohio to help the Lynn family secure legal protection under a federal witness safety program, I returned to our town alone. I didn't go home. I rented a room at a cheap motel near the financial district. Every morning at 8 a.m., wearing my dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase bought with our second mortgage money, I walked into the offices of Forensic Audit and Risk Management Inc. For 3 weeks, I worked 16 hours a day alongside a team of independent forensic accountants. We didn't look at Tyler. We looked at Brenda. "She's overleveraged," the senior auditor, an elderly man named Henderson, said, tapping his pencil against a massive spreadsheet projected onto the wall. "Vance Construction has $40 million in commercial paper coming due on the 15th of next month. She was relying on a $20 million equity injection from the state teachers' pension fund to stay solvent." "Who manages the pension fund's investment board?" I asked. "A board of trustees," Henderson smiled thinly, "composed primarily of retired public school educators. People just like you and your husband, Mrs. Miller." My lips curved into a cold, merciless line. The next morning, I stood before the board of the state teachers' pension fund. I didn't bring legal documents. I brought a laptop. I projected 2 images onto the conference room screen side by side. On the left, a high-resolution engineering report obtained by David Miller, showing structural cracks and illegal foundation shortcuts in Brenda Vance's flagship residential development, the Grand Crest. On the right, a photograph of Chloe's torn, mud-caked white dress resting on the stainless steel autopsy table. The 12 board members, men and women in their 50s and 60s, former high school principals, retired literature teachers, mothers and grandfathers, sat in absolute, horrified silence. Brenda Vance is asking you for $20 million of public teacher pension. Money to float her failing construction company, I said into the quiet room. Voice was clear, resonant, and devoid of self-pity. She claims her business is solid. She claims her family represents community excellence. I tapped the keyboard. A 3-second audio clip played through the boardroom speakers, a recording David Miller had captured outside the police station 3 weeks ago using a long-range directional microphone. Brenda's sharp, arrogant voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Honestly, she deserved it. She's lucky it was my son. Otherwise, some homeless crackhead would have gotten to her. A female board member gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. A retired history teacher at the head of the table slammed his fist down onto the mahogany desk so hard his coffee cup spilled. Motion to immediately terminate all investment negotiations with Vance Construction Group, the chairman declared, his face dark with fury. Do I have a second? Second. 3 voices shouted simultaneously. Motion passed unanimously, the chairman said, looking at me with eyes full of deep, sorrowful respect. Mrs. Miller, take her down. When a tower built on debt loses its foundation, it doesn't crumble slowly. It explodes. 48 hours after the pension fund pulled its $20 million investment, news of Vance Construction's instability leaked to the financial press. By Thursday afternoon, 3 major credit rating agencies downgraded Vance Construction to junk status. By Friday morning, subcontractors on 4 of Brenda's luxury building sites pulled their workers off the job, demanding immediate cash payments for back wages. I sat in my motel room, watching the local business news report live from outside Brenda Vance's corporate headquarters. A crowd of furious homeowners from the Grand Crest development had gathered outside the iron gates, holding signs that read, "Building fraud," and "Our homes are caving in." In the middle of the broadcast, a black luxury SUV pulled out of the executive parking garage, surrounded by private bodyguards. The camera zoomed in through the tinted rear window. Brenda Vance was sitting in the back seat. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale, frantically speaking into 2 phones at once while her security team pushed back the shouting crowd. My phone chimed. It was a text message from David Miller. State Attorney General's Fraud Division just executed a search warrant on her main office. They seized all server logs and tax records. She's finished. Financially. I stared at the screen, my expression unmoving. Not yet, I thought. Financial ruin is just the background music. Now comes the main event. I picked up my briefcase, checked the physical evidence folder inside, including Maya's bloodstained shirt, the verified DNA reports from Ohio, and the sworn affidavits from 3 former prep school administrators, and dialed the direct line for District Attorney Thomas Wright. Mr. Wright, I said calmly when he picked up. My name is Claire Miller. I am Chloe Miller's mother. Mrs. Miller, the DA sighed softly. I know who you are. I've been following the news about Vance Construction. But regarding your daughter's criminal case, the juvenile transfer hearing is scheduled for Monday. The defense is arguing that Tyler should remain in the juvenile system because he has no prior criminal history. He has 3 prior felonies, Mr. Wright, I interrupted smoothly. And I have the physical DNA evidence, the victims, and the original police report sitting on my lap. Silence on the line. What did you say? The DA asked, his tone instantly shifting from tired bureaucracy to razor-sharp professional alertness. I'm standing outside your office building right now, I said, stepping out of the motel lobby into the afternoon sun. I suggest you order some fresh coffee. It's going to be a very long afternoon. The grand jury courtroom on the 4th floor of the county courthouse was packed to capacity. Reporters from every regional newspaper sat in the gallery, their pens hovering over pads. Local residents, teachers from Chloe's high school and parents from our subdivision filled the wooden benches. On the left side of the aisle sat Marcus and me. Marcus wore his black funeral suit. I wore my gray work suit. Between us sat a small wooden box containing Chloe's favorite pearl hair clip and her high school graduation cap. On the right side of the aisle sat Brenda Vance and her legal team. Brenda looked like a shell of the woman who had thrown $20,000 at my feet 4 weeks ago. Her designer suit was slightly rumpled, her makeup heavy in a desperate attempt to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 24 hours prior, and her personal assets had been frozen by federal investigators. Beside her sat Tyler. He wore a tailored blue blazer that was tight across his broad, heavy shoulders. He was clean-shaven, his hair combed neatly, instructed by his lawyers to look small, innocent, and remorseful. When he entered the room, he kept his head bowed, dabbing his eyes with a tissue. To play the part of a frightened boy, Judge Raymond sat behind the high mahogany bench, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. This hearing is convened to determine whether the minor, Tyler Vance, aged 16, shall be transferred from the jurisdiction of the Juvenile Division to the Adult Criminal Division of the Superior Court. Judge Raymond announced, his voice booming through the silent room. Brenda's lead defense attorney stood up, straightening his papers with smooth confidence. Your Honor, the lawyer began, gesturing toward Tyler. We are looking at a tragic, isolated incident involving two young people playing near a park. Tyler is a child. He has no prior criminal record, no history of violence, and a stellar academic background. To throw a 16-year-old child into the adult prison system based on the tragic outcome of a reckless juvenile game would be a travesty of justice. He sat down, smiling faintly at Brenda, who gave a small, trembling nod of relief. District Attorney Thomas Wright stood up slowly from our table. He didn't look at the defense lawyer. He walked directly to the center of the courtroom, carrying a thick, leather-bound binder. Your Honor, Wright said, his voice deep and echoing. The defense speaks of a child. The defense speaks of an isolated incident. Allow me to introduce State's Exhibit A. He tapped a button on the lectern. The large digital screen hanging above the jury box lit up. A photograph appeared. A 12-year-old girl sitting in a hospital bed, her face bruised, her arm in a cast. Brenda's defense lawyer leaped to his feet. Objection. Your Honor, what is the meaning of this? This has zero relevance to the current matter. Overruled. Judge Raymond snapped, leaning forward. Proceed, Mr. Wright. 4 years ago, Wright continued, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a guillotine blade. Tyler Vance committed an aggravated sexual battery against a 12-year-old female classmate at St. Andrew's Academy. A collective, deafening gasp swept through the gallery. Brenda's face went completely gray. She grabbed her lawyer's arm, her fingers digging through his suit jacket. The crime was covered up, Wright said, turning a page. Paid off by Mrs. Brenda Vance using funds siphoned illegally from her corporate accounts, a crime for which she is currently under federal indictment. He looked toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom. The prosecution calls Maya Lin to the stand. The heavy oak doors opened. Maya walked down the central carpeted aisle. She wore a simple white shirt, her hair tied back, her posture straight. Behind her walked her mother and Marcus. Tyler turned his head. When his eyes landed on Maya, the innocent, frightened boy facade shattered completely. His mouth opened, his pupils dilating in sudden, raw panic. He knew that face. He knew the girl whose arm he had cut 4 years ago. No, Tyler whispered, his voice cracking loudly in the quiet room. No. She signed the paper. Quiet, his lawyer hissed, grabbing his shoulder. Maya took the witness stand. She adjusted the microphone with a steady hand. She didn't look at Brenda. She didn't look at the judge. She looked straight at Tyler. My name is Maya Lin, she said into the microphone, her voice ringing clear and unbroken across the courtroom. 4 years ago, Tyler Vance trapped me in a sports shed. He told me that because his mother owned the school, no one would ever believe me. She unbuttoned her cuff and lifted her left arm, holding her long, white scar up toward the judge and the news cameras in the gallery. He was right, Maya said softly. His mother paid my parents. They drove us out of the town. And because he suffered zero consequences, 4 years later he thought he could do the exact same thing to Chloe Miller. She paused, tears finally glistening in her eyes, but her voice never wavered. He isn't a child, Your Honor, Maya declared. He's a predator who uses his age as a weapon. The courtroom erupted into utter chaos. Reporters scrambled for the doors to broadcast the breaking news. Photographers. Cameras flashed like lightning storms against the mahogany walls. Order. Order in this court. Judge Raymond slammed his wooden gavel repeatedly, until the gallery settled into a tense, vibrating silence. Brenda stood up frantically, her expensive composure entirely gone, screaming at the bench. She's lying. She's a liar. We gave her family money because they were blackmailing us. My son is innocent. Mrs. Vance, sit down or I will have you held in contempt. Judge Raymond barked. He turned his fierce, penetrating gaze onto Tyler. Tyler was no longer looking at his mother. He was no longer looking at his lawyers. He was looking at me. I stood up slowly from the wooden bench in the second row. I looked into his eyes with an expression of cold, absolute detachment. The boy who had flipped me the middle finger in the precinct hallway was gone. In his place sat a terrified, cowardly 16-year-old bully whose protective shield of money, lawyers, and maternal lies had just been ripped away, leaving him naked before the law. Judge Raymond didn't hesitate for a single second. He picked up his pen, signed the heavy legal document on his desk with a sharp, decisive scratch, and looked down over his spectacles. This court finds overwhelming evidence of an established, escalation pattern of violent, predatory behavior, Judge Raymond declared, his voice echoing with absolute authority. The defendant's age is vastly outweighed by the severity, premeditation, and extreme malice of the crime. He slammed his gavel down. Thud. Tyler Vance is hereby transferred to the jurisdiction of the Superior Court. He will be tried as an adult for first-degree murder, aggravated sexual assault, and kidnapping. Bail is denied. Bailiffs take the defendant into custody. Two heavy-set sheriff's deputies stepped forward, pulling steel handcuffs from their utility belts. No. No. Tyler screamed, suddenly thrashing wildly as the deputies grabbed his arms. His cool, sociopathic demeanor completely collapsed into a pathetic, hysterical tantrum. Mom. Help me. Don't let them take me. Mommy. Tyler. Brenda shrieked, throwing her body over the wooden divider, reaching for her son's jacket. Get your hands off my son. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? A female deputy grabbed Brenda's arms, shoving her back into her seat. Ma'am. Step back. The iron handcuffs clicked tightly around Tyler's thick wrists. Click. Click. As the deputies dragged the screaming, sobbing 16-year-old through the side door leading to the adult holding cells, Tyler's foot caught on the heavy oak frame. He fell hard onto his knees, crying into the floorboards, weeping like a toddler who had lost his toy. Mommy. It hurts. The cuffs are too tight. Mommy. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind him. Bang. The trial took 6 days. Without her money, without her company, and facing her own federal indictment for corporate fraud and witness tampering, Brenda Vance sat at the defense table in a cheap thrift store sweater provided by a public defender. The jury deliberated for precisely 42 minutes. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Because he was tried as an adult for first-degree murder with special, aggravating circumstances, the judge delivered the maximum sentence allowed under state law: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 50 years. When the sentence was read, Brenda didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply slumped sideways in her wooden chair, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, her mind completely shattered by the reality that her precious golden son would spend his entire youth, middle age, and old age inside a maximum security adult state penitentiary. 3 weeks later, the County Women's Correctional Facility was a cold, gray concrete structure built on a bleak hill 30 miles outside the city. I sat behind the thick acrylic partition in the visitor's room, wearing a simple, beige cardigan. The heavy iron door on the other side opened. Brenda Vance was led inside by a female guard. She wore an oversized orange jumpsuit. Her styled hair was gone, cut short and graying at the roots. Her skin was sallow, her expensive gold jewelry replaced by a plastic identification wristband. She sat down on the metal stool, picking up the black plastic telephone receiver. With a weak, trembling hand, I picked up my receiver. Are you happy now, Claire? Brenda rasped into the phone, her voice sounding 50 years older. My company is gone. My house was auctioned yesterday. My son is in a cell with murderers. Are you satisfied? I looked through the scratched glass at the woman who had stood in the police station 4 weeks ago, throwing $20,000 at my face, telling me my daughter deserved to die because she wore pretty dresses. I didn't destroy you, Brenda, I said softly into the receiver. You destroyed yourself. You built a monster, fed him with your money, and then acted surprised when he dragged your entire world into the dark. Brenda's lower lip quivered, tears welling in her hollow eyes. He's just a boy, Claire. He's crying every night. He sent me a letter begging me to bring him his plush pillow. Chloe was just a girl, Brenda, I replied, my tone flat, unyielding, as cold as marble. She loved yellow sundresses. She loved drawing in her notebook. He begged your son for her life, and he covered her face until her world went black. I stood up slowly from my chair, holding the telephone receiver tightly against my ear. He will never see a sunlit park again, Brenda, I whispered. He will never hold a girl's hand. He will wear an orange jumpsuit until his body is old and gray, and every single second of every single day, he will know that his mother was the one who enabled his path to hell. Brenda let out a ragged, choked sob, dropping her head onto the metal shelf, weeping hysterically into the plastic receiver. I set the phone back onto its hook. I turned my back on her and walked out through the heavy iron doors into the bright afternoon sun. 6 months later, The spring breeze blew soft and warm over the hills of the community park. Where the old, dark woods used to stand, there was now a wide, sunlit meadow, filled with thousands of blooming white, pink, and yellow wildflowers. In the center of the meadow, where the ancient oak tree had once stood, sat a beautiful, hand-carved white stone pavilion. On the front of the stone archway, gold lettering caught the afternoon sunlight. The Chloe Miller Sanctuary for Young Women, where every girl is free to wear her prettiest dress. Children were laughing on the nearby playground swings. High school girls in bright spring outfits sat on the wooden benches, reading books and drinking iced tea under the blue sky. I stood near the edge of the flower bed, wearing a yellow sundress, one of Chloe's favorites that I had tailored to fit me. Marcus walked up beside me, carrying 2 cold bottles of lemonade. He looked thinner, his hair streaked with silver at the temples, but the haunting hollow look in his eyes had finally faded, replaced by a quiet, deep peace. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close against his shoulder. The foundation approved 6 new scholarships for artistic high school seniors. Today, Claire, Marcus said softly, looking out at the blooming meadow. The first recipient is a girl who wants to study fashion design. I smiled, taking a sip of the cold lemonade. She'd love that, I murmured, leaning my head against his chest. I closed my eyes, listening to the soft rustle of the warm breeze drifting through the wildflowers, smelling the sweet scent of fresh spring earth. I pictured my daughter, my sweet, brilliant Chloe, standing in the center of the meadow, wearing her pristine white dress, her hair blowing in the wind, holding her giant princess plushie, laughing under a sun that would never set again. We did it, baby, I whispered in my heart. The monsters are gone, and your world is blooming.